The golden arches of McDonald's cast long shadows across the parking lot as the afternoon sun began its descent. Inside the bustling restaurant on Fifth Avenue, the usual symphony of sizzling fryers, beeping registers, and overlapping conversations created the familiar soundtrack of fast food commerce. It was here, in this unremarkable corner of the city, that three lives would intersect in a way that would forever change how they saw the world and themselves. Marcus Wellington III adjusted his designer watch, a Patek Philippe worth more than most people's annual salary, and scrolled through his Instagram feed while waiting for his order. At 19, he had never known want, never experienced the gnawing uncertainty of an empty bank account, never felt the cold shoulder of society's judgment based on appearance alone. His perfectly styled blonde hair caught the fluorescent lights as he laughed at something on his phone, completely absorbed in his digital world of privilege and entitlement. The Bentley parked outside bore his personalized license plate, RICH3, a not-so-subtle declaration of his status as the third Marcus Wellington in a dynasty built on real estate, technology investments, and old money that stretched back generations. His father, Marcus Wellington Jr., had made it clear that image was everything, that appearances mattered more than substance, and that their family name opened doors that remained forever closed to others. "Order 47, Marcus," called out the teenage employee behind the counter, her voice barely audible above the ambient noise. Marcus pocketed his phone and strutted toward the counter, his designer sneakers, limited edition Air Jordans that cost $800, squeaking slightly against the polished floor. He grabbed his bag containing what he considered slumming it food, a Big Mac meal that represented more of an adventure than sustenance for someone whose usual lunch involved white cloth tables and sommelier-selected wines. As he turned to leave, something caught his attention. Or rather, someone. Huddled in the corner booth sat a man whose appearance immediately triggered Marcus's deeply ingrained prejudices and assumptions. The stranger's clothes hung loose and worn, bearing the unmistakable signs of extended use without regular washing. His graying beard was unkempt, his hair matted and oily, and his weathered hands clutched a small cup of coffee as if it were the most precious thing in the world. What particularly caught Marcus's attention was the careful way the man was eating. He had apparently ordered nothing more than a single hamburger from the dollar menu, and he was eating it with deliberate slowness, savoring each bite as if trying to make it last as long as possible. The man's eyes held a distant quality, as if he were seeing beyond the confines of the restaurant, beyond the immediate reality of his circumstances. Something about the scene sparked a cruel amusement in Marcus. Here was the perfect opportunity to demonstrate his superiority, to flex the social muscles that his upbringing had so carefully developed. He felt the familiar rush of power that came from having everything while others had nothing, the intoxicating sense of being on top of a hierarchy that he had never questioned. Marcus approached the man's table with the confident swagger of someone who had never been told no, never been refused, never been made to feel small or insignificant. He pulled out his phone and began recording, a habit he had developed for his social media presence where he regularly showcased his wealth and lifestyle to his thousands of followers. "Well, well, well," Marcus said, his voice dripping with theatrical disdain, loud enough to draw attention from other patrons. "A real-life hobo right here in McDonald's. I bet you're really living the dream, aren't you, buddy?" The homeless man looked up slowly, his tired eyes meeting Marcus's cold, calculating gaze. There was no anger in those eyes, no immediate defensiveness, just a weary recognition of a situation he had clearly experienced before. He didn't respond, simply continued eating his hamburger with the same careful deliberation. Marcus interpreted this silence as weakness, as confirmation of his superiority. He moved closer, his phone camera capturing every moment of what he considered his entertaining encounter with society's bottom rung. "What's the matter? Can't afford a real meal? I mean, look at yourself, man. When's the last time you took a shower? When's the last time you contributed anything to society? I bet you just sit around all day begging for handouts, expecting other people to take care of you." Other customers began to notice the commotion. Some pulled out their own phones, though, unlike Marcus, their recordings seemed motivated by concern rather than entertainment. A few whispered among themselves, clearly uncomfortable with the public humiliation taking place before their eyes. Marcus was just getting started. The adrenaline of power, the rush of superiority, fueled his performance. You know what your problem is? You've given up. You've accepted being a loser. Me? I drive a $100,000 car. I'm wearing clothes worth more than you'll see in a year. I'm going to inherit millions, maybe billions. And what are you going to do? Sit here drinking your sad little coffee, eating your pathetic hamburger, pretending like you matter? The homeless man set down his hamburger and looked directly at Marcus. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but clear, carrying a dignity that seemed completely at odds with his appearance. "Son, you don't know anything about me, about my story, about how I got here, but more importantly, you don't seem to know anything about yourself." Marcus laughed, a harsh, brittle sound that echoed through the restaurant. "Oh, that's rich. The homeless guy is going to give me life advice. Tell me, philosopher, what great wisdom do you have for someone like me? What could you possibly teach someone who has everything?" The man's response was unexpected. Instead of defending himself or getting angry, he smiled. A sad, knowing smile that somehow made Marcus feel momentarily unsettled. "I could tell you about compassion. I could tell you about humility. I could tell you about the difference between having wealth and being wealthy in the ways that actually matter." But Marcus was too caught up in his performance, too intoxicated by what he perceived as his dominance of the situation to really hear what the man was saying. He turned to his phone camera, addressing his future social media audience. "Guys, you are not going to believe this. I'm here at McDonald's, and I found the perfect example of why some people succeed and others fail. This guy right here, this is what giving up looks like. This is what happens when you don't have ambition, when you don't have drive, when you don't come from a family that understands success. I bet you blame everyone else for your problems, don't you? I bet you think the world owes you something. Well, let me tell you something, buddy. Nobody owes you anything. The world belongs to people like me, people who work hard, people who come from good families, people who understand how to succeed." What Marcus didn't notice in his self-absorbed performance was that a small crowd had begun to gather. What he also didn't notice was that several people in that crowd were looking at him with expressions of disgust and disapproval rather than admiration and agreement he expected. Most significantly, what he failed to observe was that one person in that crowd was pulling out a phone not to join in his mockery, but to make a very different kind of call. The homeless man continued eating his hamburger, seemingly unperturbed by Marcus's increasingly aggressive verbal assault. This calm response only seemed to infuriate Marcus further. He had expected tears, anger, defensiveness, some reaction that would validate his sense of superiority and provide good content for his social media post. Instead, he was getting dignity and quiet strength, responses that didn't fit his narrative. "You know what really kills me about people like you," Marcus continued, pacing back and forth in front of the man's table like a prosecutor addressing a jury. "You think you deserve sympathy. You think people should feel sorry for you. But look around. Look at all these hardworking people, people with jobs, people who contribute to society. Why should they care about someone who's given up on life?" A middle-aged woman at a nearby table stood up abruptly, her voice cutting through Marcus's monologue. "That's enough," she said firmly. "Leave that man alone." Marcus turned to her with a condescending smile. "Oh, great. Another bleeding heart. Let me guess. You think we should just give this guy money, right? Enable his lifestyle. That's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps people like him on the streets." "I think,"
the woman replied evenly, "that you're making a fool of yourself and showing everyone exactly what kind of person you really are." This response caught Marcus off guard. In his world, his behavior would be seen as confidence, as strength, as the natural order of things. The idea that others might view his actions differently hadn't really occurred to him. But he quickly recovered, falling back on the arrogance that had been his shield throughout his privileged life. "Lady, I don't need life lessons from someone eating at McDonald's," he sneered. "I'm trying to teach this guy about personal responsibility, about what it takes to succeed in the real world. Maybe if more people were willing to tell him the truth instead of enabling his victimhood, he might actually do something with his life." At this moment, Marcus noticed a well-dressed man in an expensive suit standing near the entrance of the restaurant. The man was watching the scene with intense interest, his expression unreadable. Marcus felt a momentary flicker of recognition. Something about the man seemed familiar, but he was too caught up in his performance to give it much thought. The homeless man finally stood up, his movements slow and deliberate. Despite his raggedness, despite the obvious signs of hard living, there was something about his bearing that commanded attention. He looked directly at Marcus, and for the first time, Marcus felt a flicker of uncertainty. "Son," the homeless man said, his voice carrying authority that seemed to come from somewhere deep within, "I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember exactly how you felt standing here, saying these things to a stranger whose story you know nothing about. Because someday, you're going to look back on this and you're going to understand what you really revealed about yourself here today." Marcus felt an inexplicable chill run down his spine, but he pushed the feeling away, doubling down on his aggressive posture. "Is that supposed to be some kind of threat? Because let me tell you something, old man, I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of anyone. My family owns half this city. My father's lawyers would eat you alive if you so much as looked at me wrong." The well-dressed man near the entrance pulled out his phone and made a brief call, speaking in low tones that Marcus couldn't overhear. Then he began walking toward them, his expression grave and determined. "As a matter of fact," Marcus continued, warming to his theme and completely oblivious to the approaching figure, "my family probably owns the building this McDonald's is in. We own restaurants, office buildings, apartment complexes all over this city. So technically, you're sitting in my family's property right now, eating food that exists because of people like us, people who create jobs and opportunities for everyone else." The homeless man looked at Marcus with what could only be described as pity. "You really believe that, don't you? You really think that having money makes you better than other people. You think it gives you the right to treat people like they're less than human." "It doesn't make me better," Marcus replied with a cruel smile. "It makes me superior. There's a difference. I'm superior because I come from superior people who made superior choices. You're inferior because you've made inferior choices that led to inferior results. It's not complicated." The well-dressed man had reached their table. He stood quietly for a moment, observing the scene with cold, calculating eyes. When he spoke, his voice carried the unmistakable tone of authority. "Excuse me," he said, addressing Marcus directly. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. I'm James Harrison, regional manager for this McDonald's and 17 others in the metropolitan area." Marcus turned toward the newcomer, his chest puffing out with self-importance. Here was someone who would surely understand his perspective, someone from the business world who would appreciate his tough-love approach to social problems. "Oh, perfect timing," Marcus said with satisfaction. "I was just explaining to your customer here about personal responsibility and the importance of contributing to society instead of just taking from it.
I assume you deal with people like this all the time. People who loiter, who make other customers uncomfortable, who basically treat your establishment like their personal homeless shelter." James Harrison's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Actually, I was more interested in your behavior than his. I've been watching you for the past few minutes, and I have to say, I'm quite disturbed by what I've witnessed." Marcus blinked, not quite processing what he was hearing. "I'm sorry, what? I'm disturbed by what you've witnessed? I'm trying to help this guy understand reality. I'm trying to motivate him to maybe make something of himself instead of just accepting failure. By humiliating him publicly? By recording him without his consent? By making assumptions about his life, his circumstances, his character, based entirely on his appearance?" Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath him, though he couldn't quite understand why. "Look, Mr. Harrison, I understand that you have to be politically correct in your position, but sometimes people need to hear hard truths. Sometimes compassion means being tough, means not enabling destructive behavior." He nodded slowly, then turned to address the homeless man. "Sir, I want to apologize for the treatment you've received in our establishment. This is absolutely not reflective of our values or the respect we have for all our customers." The homeless man smiled sadly. "Thank you, but it's all right. I've dealt with worse. This young man doesn't know any better. He's been taught that wealth equals worth, that having money makes him superior to people who don't. It's not entirely his fault. It's how he was raised." "How I was raised? How I was raised? I was raised by successful people who taught me the value of hard work and achievement. I was raised to understand that actions have consequences, that you get out of life what you put into it. I wasn't raised to make excuses or blame other people for my failures." James Harrison's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression became even more serious. "Mr. Wellington," he said, and Marcus started in surprise at hearing his name. "I've just received some very interesting information. It seems your little performance here has already made its way onto social media. Several people have posted videos of your interaction with this gentleman." Marcus felt a flush of pride. "Good! Maybe more people need to see what real talk looks like. Maybe more people need to understand that enabling failure isn't kindness, it's cruelty."
"I don't think you understand," Harrison continued. "The videos aren't being shared because people admire your real talk. They're being shared because people are appalled by your behavior. You're not coming across as tough or motivational. You're coming across as cruel, entitled, and ignorant." This was not going according to Marcus's script. In his world, his behavior would be seen as leadership, as strength, as the kind of tough love that built character and success. The idea that others might interpret his actions as cruel or inappropriate was genuinely confusing to him. "I think there's been a misunderstanding here," Marcus said, his confidence beginning to waver slightly. "I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to be helpful. Sometimes helping people means telling them things they don't want to hear." The homeless man stood up again, this time moving toward the exit. As he passed Marcus, he paused and looked at him one more time. "Son, I hope you learn something from this. I hope you learn it before it's too late." Marcus watched him go, feeling strangely unsettled by the encounter. Something about the man's dignity, his complete lack of defensiveness, his almost paternal concern had been unexpected and disturbing. But he shook off the feeling, turning back to Harrison with renewed confidence. "Well, I'm glad we clear that up," Marcus said. "Look, I understand you have to maintain certain standards in your establishment, but I think we can all agree that—" Harrison's phone rang, interrupting Marcus mid-sentence. "Excuse me?" Harrison said, answering the call. "Yes, sir." "Yes, he's here." "I understand." "Yes, sir. I'll handle it immediately." He hung up and looked at Marcus with an expression that had transformed from professional courtesy to something approaching concern. "Mr. Wellington,
That call was from my district manager. It appears that your little video has been seen by some very important people. People who are not at all pleased with what they've witnessed." Marcus laughed, though it sounded forced even to his own ears. "Important people? Who could possibly be more important than my family? Do you have any idea who I am? Do you understand the kind of influence my father has in this city?" Harrison nodded slowly. "As a matter of fact, I do understand exactly who your father is. That's what makes this situation so interesting." Before Marcus could ask what he meant, the restaurant's entrance doors opened and the homeless man returned. But this time he wasn't alone. Walking beside him was a man in an impeccably tailored suit. A man whose face Marcus recognized from business magazines, newspaper articles, and corporate websites throughout the city. The newcomer was David McDonald. Not just any David McDonald, but the David McDonald, founder and CEO of McDonald Enterprises, the franchise corporation that owned not just this McDonald's, but over 3,000 McDonald's locations across the country. He was a billionaire, a philanthropist, and one of the most respected business leaders in the nation. Marcus felt his world tilt on its axis as David McDonald approached their table, his arm around the shoulders of the homeless man Marcus had been tormenting for the past 20 minutes. "Marcus Wellington III. I believe you've met my son." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He looked back and forth between the two men, his mind struggling to process what he was hearing. The homeless man, the man he had mocked, humiliated, and dismissed as worthless, was the son of one of the most powerful men in the country. I don't understand," Marcus stammered, his usual confidence evaporating like morning mist. "This man, he can't be—" David McDonald's expression was stern, but not unkind. "My son Michael has been struggling with some personal challenges. He's been living on the streets, by choice, trying to understand the world from a different perspective, trying to learn lessons that can't be taught in boardrooms or country clubs." Marcus felt the room spinning around him. Everything he had said, everything he had assumed, every cruel word and mocking gesture had been directed at someone whose family wealth made his own look modest by comparison. But more than that, he had revealed something about himself that he was only now beginning to understand. "Mr. McDonald, sir, I had no idea. I never would have— If I had known he was wealthy, you would have treated him with respect? If you had known his family had money, you would have seen him as a human being, worthy of dignity?" Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Because the truth was exactly what David McDonald had said. He would have behaved completely differently if he had known about the man's wealth and connections. And that realization revealed something about his character that he wasn't prepared to face. "This is what I've been learning out here," he said softly. "How people treat you when they think you have nothing, when they think you're powerless, when they think you can't help or hurt them. You learn who people really are when they think there are no consequences for their actions." James Harrison stepped forward, his usual professional courtesy replaced by obvious discomfort. "Mr. McDonald, sir, I want to assure you that this behavior is absolutely not tolerated in our establishments. We pride ourselves on treating all customers with respect and dignity." Donald nodded. "I know, James. This isn't about your restaurant or your staff. This is about something much more fundamental. About how we treat our fellow human beings. About what our society teaches young people about worth and dignity and respect." Marcus felt as if he was drowning. Every word, every gesture, every assumption he had made was being replayed in his mind, but now with the knowledge of who he had actually been talking to. The humiliation was crushing, but worse than that was the growing realization of what his behavior revealed about his character. "Please," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I made a mistake. I didn't know. I never would have—" Mr. McDonald studied Marcus's face for a long moment. "The question isn't whether we can forget this happened. The question is whether you'll remember it. Whether you'll learn something from it. whether this moment will change how you see people, how you treat people, how you understand your place in the world. The restaurant had gone completely quiet. Every customer, every employee was watching the drama unfold with fascination and discomfort. Several people were still recording, and Marcus realized with growing horror that his humiliation was being broadcast in real time to potentially thousands of people. David McDonald pulled out his phone and showed Marcus the screen. "Your video has been viewed over 50,000 times in the past hour. The comments are, well, they're not favorable. #RichKidReality is trending on Twitter. I suspect by tomorrow, your face will be recognized by millions of people as an example of everything that's wrong with entitled privilege." Marcus felt sick. His entire world, his social media presence, his reputation, his future prospects was crashing down around him. Everything he had built, everything he had worked for, was being destroyed by 30 minutes of behavior that he thought would make him look strong and successful. "What can I do?" he asked desperately. "How can I fix this? How can I make this right?" Michael McDonald was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus with those tired but wise eyes. "The question isn't whether you can throw money at this, isn't something your father's influence can make go away. This is about who you are as a person, about the values you carry, about how you see other human beings." "I'm not a bad person," Marcus said, tears beginning to form in his eyes. I was raised to believe that success means you're better than people who haven't succeeded. I was taught that wealth indicates character, that poor people must have done something wrong to end up that way." David McDonald nodded slowly. "And now you're learning that those beliefs are not just wrong, they're dangerous. They turn us into people who can justify cruelty, who can dismiss suffering, who can treat other human beings as less than human." The weight of the moment was crushing Marcus. He looked around the restaurant at all the faces staring at him, some with anger, some with pity, some with disappointment. He realized that for the first time in his life, he was experiencing what it felt like to be on the receiving end of judgment, to be found wanting, to be seen as less than worthy. Michael McDonald reached out and put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Son, this can be the worst day of your life, or it can be the day you started becoming the person you're capable of being. That choice is entirely up to you." Marcus looked up at him. This man he had tried to destroy with his words and assumptions, this man who was now showing him more kindness than he deserved. "How?" he whispered. "How do I come back from this? How do I become better?" "You start by admitting that you were wrong. Not wrong because you didn't know who I was, but wrong in how you see people. Wrong in how you judge worth. Wrong in thinking that having money makes you superior to anyone else." David McDonald stepped forward. "Marcus, your father and I have been business acquaintances for years. He's a good man, but I suspect he's as much a product of his upbringing as you are of yours. This moment, this can be an opportunity for your entire family to examine your values, to think about what kind of legacy you want to leave.